Good afternoon, London News. Dr. Barry Melbourne. We're just going to pop across to show you an interview I had last night with London News in Worcestershire in England. We talked about persons, the difference between a person and a living man or a living woman, and a little bit about the syntax grammar. Quite interesting. So have a look at this, and I hope we all gather something from it, but it's just another way of getting the word out. The most important thing of all is we all stick together and learn and fight this corruption. Take care for now. Signing off. Bye for now.
Good evening. This is Lundov News UK, and going to pass you over to Dr. Barry in Melbourne, who's going to explain syntax and what it's useful for.
Yeah. Good evening, Dominic. Well, basically, you obviously had a look at that video what I just put up recently. Now, I am an amateur, an absolute amateur involved in this syntax grammar. So, for God's sake, anybody out there watching this, don't get too carried away when making mistakes. Syntax, why we use it, and that's probably a question you're going to ask me, is because when you receive documents from the so-called government, which we've got to remember now, these are not governments anymore, they're private corporations, entwined and run and controlled by larger ones, and we've just seen a good example of that over the last since they brought in this weaponized the common cold, if you like, or influenza, which we've got to be very serious. It does affect people's lungs, and if they have a weakness in those lungs, they're going to get very ill. But this is what we're not talking about this. But they brought out an act, the Stay-at-Home Act, and I don't know what it's called in certain places, but it could be seen on reasonable grounds if you look at the grammar of this document, which I went through a little bit of grammarizing, or whatever the hell you call it. It was written by a 5-year-old child when it comes to making sense. Now, when you look at, we have a list of adverbs which we use every day. I got a list of them there, and those adverbs, they just basically have his, her, like it's the words we use every day, but these change the word afterwards. And then a pronoun is a no-no. It's like when somebody sends you something from a courthouse citation, you are requested to attend. And when it starts off with you, it's a pronoun. And a pronoun, are they actually talking to John's Fong Yong Chu in China? Are they talking to someone's sheep, a female sheep, you? So it's really, it has no meaning really. And requested or requested, when it starts off with certain words, it means no contract.
Hopefully all the viewers enjoy the video. It's a bit in depth, but it does explain all the different adverbs and meanings of words and colour of law. And that'll follow on in a second. So see if you can get your head around it. It's very difficult, but have a look at it because it's very useful in court and other such legal cases, parking fines, etc., etc.
Yeah. Well, like it says, the chief health officer, which we wrote down in numbers because you can't write pronoun, adverb, adjunct, adjective, and all these top. So you put numbers. So number 3 is an adjective. Now, if you look at the term adjective, it colors something. It's an illusion. So the word after that becomes an illusion. So these documents are written, and if you look at the whole thing, it's totally, it's fiction. It's gobbledygook. It has no lawful meaning. And when you receive documents from the courts, and a summons and anything like that, or even police paperwork, it's all in boxes. And anything that's in the box doesn't connect with the next box. So there's no continuance of conversation even. So, and when you find something is in brackets, it's not actually, it's got nothing to do with the rest of the document. The whole thing is an illusion and fiction.
That sounds very similar to a court. They seem to be in boxes in a courthouse. Is that the same kind of thing?
Yeah, that's another good one. Well, this is why the term level playing field. It's not a level playing field. And I think that's really what they meant when they looked inside courts in the old days, they were pretty honorable. I mean, the old solicitors and the old barristers and people, and lawmen of any description had a little bit of honor, so they were pretty good. But now, since they become privatized, and it's now just, I call it the new state bank. And if you're going to go into a court, you have the judge sits up on a higher level, and he's in a box. Now, as again, anything in a box doesn't communicate outside that box, so he's blind, he cannot hear, he cannot see. Then we have the witness box. Now, the witness box is again is on a little lower level, and they're in a box, so it cannot be seen, cannot be heard if you look at it in communication. And then we have the jury, and they're in a box, so they cannot hear the judge, they cannot see, and it just goes on.
Sounds very much like a ship, like the captain of a ship, that kind of thing.
That's exactly what it is. He's up there on the steering the ship. He's in dream world. So as the only people who are on the same level is the defendant or the victim and the prosecution. So they're on the same level. So if you're going to have an argument in court, you waste your time communicating with the judge because you cannot hear, you cannot see. So you obviously, by failing to answer a question, that's contract as well. So you can say no comment or all due respects, but you take your argument up with the prosecution and try and get full disclosure of them. In most cases, they can't. So if you're the principal there and you ask for full disclosure, and they don't even know who the hell you are, because that's the first question any magistrate will ask is your name, John Michael Smith. And this is where the argument starts, and this is where you've got to learn how to handle yourself. Oh, you're going to run a bit of that video that on your YouTube over there in the UK, in Worcestershire, in the winters and the flooding. I've seen some of your videos on the flooding, Dominic. You had a bit of fun with that, I see.
Well, as part of my daily exercise, I thought I'd have a walk down, have a look. I think I got there just at the right time to do the little video, because I always take my camera. You never know what's going to happen. And yeah, had some good shots. Met some interesting people on the way down. Nice little day out, really. So that's all good. What's the difference between being a person and a living human being?
Good question. And one time you could Google it, but I don't think Google tell you anymore. I'm not too sure. I've got no argument with Google. But if you look it up, you'll find, ask what a person is in law, and it will tell you that it is a deceased estate at law. You are actually, you're not living. And that is a persona. The word persona is mask. So you're wearing a mask. If you look in the mirror, you can see the image is a person, because it's not living. You couldn't get it. You held up a mirror to the image in the mirror and asked it to blow some air or breath on it and fog up the mirror. It couldn't. So you're the only one. You're the living man. You can actually fog that mirror up. So that's a good distinction between the living and the dead. It's an image. Now, if you accept the fact that you're a person, well, then you've got to accept the consequences of being a person. And then you've got to be careful when you say, I am not a person, I'm a living man. You're I think people in a court case or when it becomes to pension time, you say, oh, listen, I'm not a person, I'm a living man. You've got to distinguish, you've got to say in now time, I am in the courthouse, at now time, Your Honor, with all due respect, I am a living man, I am not a person, and I do not contract, with all due respect. So you've got to distinguish between the living and the dead. Now, if any magistrate wants to communicate with you as a living man, he can't. He only can communicate with the dead, because your deceased estate is your name in capital letters. And that's why they've got to get, are you John Smith? And you say, yes, I am John Smith or Michael Doe, then you actually accept the contract.
So this obviously must all go back to, I presume, the signing of the birth certificate from when you were born, I guess, with would it be your surname? Is that the name of the dead? Am I right with that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it goes back to when the papal bull brought out, and a papal bull was law way back, because they made a lot of laws, and they sent that to the UK in September. And I think the fire was the 5th. I always get mixed up whether it's the 25th or the 5th of September. The 5th of September in London, when they had the Great Fire, the papal bull was there to be discussed, and they passed the Act of 1666. Hence the term, the mark of the beast 666. Now, the beast obviously must have been the Pope, because he created that quest of the fee, where all men and women are dead and all property belonged to the Vatican. And it still stands today. If you ask any solicitor, especially a young one just coming out of the out of college and ask them if possession is 9/10 of the law, who owns the other bit? Well, the title. And the title is held by the Vatican in a lot of cases. So that's basically never admit the fact that you're a person, especially if it's not in your interest.
Is there any way that someone can, I think that you say it's your fiction. Is there a way that you can leave your fiction and actually own your fiction?
Well, the way to do that is with an ID, and I know that you've got one down there in Worcestershire or the other side of the world, wherever it is up the top, that you have an ID. And if you're ever asked for ID, of course you're going to produce your driving license. It's probably the most that most people have, or your something with your address on it at home, electricity bill or something to prove who you are. You and I have identifications that have our surnames in capitals in brackets, so they're not part of the ID, but it does state that we are diplomats for that sending state. So it's clearly saying that we're a living man, we're not a person, and we don't have to contract with any. It goes back to the law. There is only one law, and that's God's law, and that comes from the Ten Commandments. Now, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's fact. Now, if you don't believe the Ten Commandments, it still doesn't matter, because it goes back to the days when there were villages in the UK and they had disputes, and someone's building encroached on your building. Then they went to the head men, or men that were in those days, and they got round and had a case, like a court case, and they made a decision what to do about that. And there was no records kept. But in 1066, after the Battle of Hastings, when William the Conqueror took over, they started keeping records, and that becomes the start of the common law. So it goes back that far. And of course, the Magna Carta and all these. Well, there was a charter which wasn't a Magna Carta, because there were several charters later on, and later on they made I think it was King John actually made a bigger charter, and becomes Magna, as in big, so the Magna Carta, and then later on that became controlled by the Parliament. So the kings couldn't make any more charters. So it was controlled, and it still stands today. And the Americans, they built their law on it. And in fact, the Bar Association in America actually came to Rudy Mayer in London and put a shrine up there. So it is enshrined, and it is part of our law. All the other laws that are fictional laws or statute laws are all man-made, and they're all made for persons and not for the living man. And even a traffic offense, driving recklessly on a highway, reckless endangerment, they could be charged with common law, but they'd have to go to court, and they wouldn't make any money out of it. So it's easy to give them a fine. So that's why we're tied up in this fictional world. And of course, we've allowed it to happen.
Going back to America, just what I've been seeing on the news recently, I noticed that the Senate is all fenced off around. I mean, what's the significance with that?
Personal opinion, and that doesn't really account for a lot. But anyhow, it could be seen on reasonable grounds that Washington is an independent country like the Vatican, and District Corporation of London is. There's 3 independent countries, and the Vatican is one of them. And there's the District Corporation of London, where all the banks inside the walls. You see, in 1066, in 1066, London walls were never breached. So that's always been an independent country there. The Queen has to get permission to enter in there.
That's why we've got 2 mayors, isn't it?
That's right. You've got the Lord Mayor of London, and then you've got the Mayor of London outside. Never the twain shall ever meet. And of course, Washington was created I think they set it up in 1913, when most of the Congress has gone away. A couple of the crooked ones stayed back and organized that. So it's an independent country. So now it's walled off, apparently, and they got all these troops in there. So it could be seen that the new president may not be. He may be the president of the Corporation of America, and outside of that, then there is the Republic of America, right? So, and if another president was to come in and say in March, he'd be the 9th president of the Republic of the United States. So look, there's something going on, and there's lots of hearsay and stuff. But we're just going to have to wait till March. 4th of March now. That's just my opinion. and Pop's opinion of a few others. But realistically, I
Well, I hope you found that interesting, and I'd like to say thank you very much to Dr. Barry in Melbourne, which is coming through nice and clear considering there's the other side of the world technology for you. So enjoy, and we'll see you shortly. So bye everyone. Thanks for viewing.
Thanks, Dominic. Have fun over there in the cold. We'll catch up with you again.
Oh,
Bye for now.
bye. Enjoy the sunshine.